in California, and there are many, many earthquakes, is that the public being prepared to take care of themselves if we do have a major earthquake.
In the event of a major earthquake, survival will depend on how quickly we all act. During a quake, most injuries are caused by fallen objects. Fasten all large and heavy objects, such as bookshelves, to wall studs. Be on the lookout for any potential risk of fire, and locate the main electricity switch, as well as gas and water valve in your home. Keep a first aid kit nearby, in addition to a portable radio and a flashlight. Don't forget batteries. It's also crucial to keep bottled drinking water on hand, plus an ample supply of non-perishable foods. Check for injuries as soon as possible. Those seriously injured should not be moved unless in danger of further injury. Because we know a major quake could occur at any time, it is impossible to be too careful. The more we know about our home, office, and surroundings, the better off we'll all be. Immediately following a disaster, people sometimes are prone to respond in a normal fashion. It's often much later, when the true magnitude of what's occurred, that the real psychological problems can start. With the more serious the disaster, the more serious the reaction. Joining us tonight to talk about the psychological aftermath an earthquake could produce is Joe Pickens of the Jackson Counseling Center. Mr. Pickens, welcome tonight. What type of behavior happens when people go through severe trauma caused by a disaster?
I think usually most people rise to the occasion and deal with the stress of the situation by handling the kind of things that have to be done. I think it's usually after that they would have what we call a delayed stress reaction, and that is somewhat similar to the post-traumatic stress disorder that people from Vietnam experienced.
Are there groups of people who could experience more trauma than others?
I think probably older people, children, people who have had some sort of traumatic experience, such as the veteran, probably people who are phobic or have a tendency to have those kind of fears are probably the most susceptible.
Mr. Pickens, thanks very much for taking the time to talk to us tonight. Joe Pickens, Jackson Counseling Center.
Thank you.
In the eventuality of a catastrophic earthquake, West Tennesseans, as you may expect, will be in for quite a change in their lifestyle. Our transportation systems will be in a state of disrepair. Railroad lines will be rendered useless as well. Cities in the northeastern United States will be without their vital sources of power because the underground gas lines that run through our area will be disrupted. Radio and television towers may no longer be standing, which means we could have to depend on ham radio operators for a source of communication. We here in Jackson and other communities may feel isolated, but we cannot be without hope. As we saw in what happened in San Francisco last October, the community came together as one, rich and poor, young and old. And San Francisco, as we see, is rebuilding because the people in San Francisco, like all Americans, are strong, and strength builds character. What we've laid out for you to consider this week on the subject of earthquakes has been designed to make you think. With a personal perspective, here's News Director Steve Beverly with his My Turn commentary.
This week at 10 o'clock, John Schofield has been telling you stories that many of you are probably still sitting at home and saying, it'll never happen here. He's just blowing smoke about a disaster we'll never see. And we may not. But the day we're not ready for an earthquake, and as John has so shockingly and truly demonstrated for you, we are in a prime locale for it to happen. If we're not ready, we'll pay for it in ways far more than in our pocketbooks. We'll pay with our lives. Now, you may say it's baloney, but ask the people in San Francisco. Never mind the naysayers who predict California will eventually drop off into the ocean. Never mind those who still believe what happened during last year's World Series was nothing more than an aberration of nature. I spent the last 4 years as a colleague of Dr. David Elton. He's a college researcher who specializes in earthquake analysis, particularly in the southeast. In fact, he tells us in our region alone, we face the possibility of dozens of small earthquakes over a decade's time. Now, we don't feel many of them because many are just not strong enough to register significant measurement on the Richter scale. But they happen nonetheless, and they happen right here. We've heard the stories this week of how susceptible a city such as Memphis is, and how our emergency teams in Jackson have to be primed for handling casualties. Gang, this isn't a cartoon show we're talking about here. Now, I'm not trying to point all of this up to get you scared or rile you into a panic, but I am telling you we need to be ready. just the same as people who flee their homes in times of hurricanes, and I've seen that. And that's one of the few disasters in which one has time to prepare. If you think having seismic requirements for houses and buildings in this region is silly, you also probably think the Titanic didn't sink. It's the same as when environmentalists quibble over the water table on our property. It's only our health they're looking after. If anything, we need to continue a dialogue on the subject of earthquake vulnerability in this area. What we don't know will hurt us more than what we don't care to know. I'm glad John has told us these stories this week, and I hope we begin to take them seriously. I'm Steve Beverly, and that's my turn.
Will our holiday forecast be a wet one? News Center 7's Gary Pickens will tell us when we return.
On the outside, a classic family sedan. On the inside, the spirit of high-octane, high-performance, rock and roll.
Maximum. We need to strengthen our defenses, but at the same time, we all want more troops.